Hey everybody, it's me, Rumi the Comic Book Poser, and I'm here today to welcome you to Enter the Poserverse. Into 2020 continues. This is part 2 of my individual publisher's Book of the Year series, where from every publisher that I'm pulling more than one book, I will do a video in this style. Sometimes I'll rank multiple books, like my normal weekly pull, or weekly rankings video. Sometimes, like my Part 1, Dark Horse, it was just one book for me that blew the rest of the content from that publisher away. So to find out what my Book of the Year is from AWA Upshot, you'll have to check it out after this.
Hey, little girl, did you want to know a secret?
I got 5 on it. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4.
I think I can say with certainty that AWA is the only publisher who I read every single book that they published in 2020. I also think that they have phenomenal things that are going on, and if I were to pick a publisher of the year, AWA has made a very, very strong case for their place in the running for that top spot. That I think everything that has come out in 2020 has been really, really good. The idea of how all of these different books play together in some form of shared universe is very fascinating to me, and I want to see how all of these different, pieces, begin to connect. And I think I, like a lot of people, as they have been reading all of the AWA titles, have been maybe fishing for clues to try and figure out all of the pieces that come together. Before I give my picks of the year from AWA, I want to give an honorable mention / my cover of the year from AWA Upshot, and that goes to Year Zero number 3. This is the cover that we had seen teased all over the place, and we didn't know what issue it was going to come for until it finally popped for issue 3. But I like the idea of, I could crop the top of this out, and it looks like, a family having a nice picnic that, aside from the smoke, it just looks like one of those stock photos that you would pick up in a picture frame at, Target. But then to see, the burning zombie in the background and the family still there, thinking nothing of it, I think is pretty interesting and a wild take on what's happening in that storyline. And I really like Year Zero Volume 1 and Volume 2. Sadly, not in my top list for the year. Coming in at number 4 is The Resistance, from J. Michael Straczynski, Mike Deodato Jr., and Frank Martin. This has been an interesting superhero tale where we are looking at and wondering about the events that have given some people superpowers, how they will use them, how they're going to challenge the structure, the power structure that they are dealing with. And this has been one of the books that we think is probably what is guiding the notion of the shared universe, right? That I've thought about a lot of different things that I've seen in Year Zero through a lens of what I know happens in Volume 1 of The Resistance. When I read Erratic a couple of weeks ago, again, I'm looking at that through the lens of what has happened in The Resistance. I know coming in January is a new offshoot series of The Resistance that tells the story of how people got some of their powers. I think that's what's happening in that series. But if there's one title that's driving this notion of the shared universe, it has to be The Resistance, and I really enjoyed that title a lot. And I think being a upstart publisher who is taking on a large universe and a superhero book is something that the degree of difficulty is quite difficult to do, but I think you have a writer and an artistic team that really helped deliver that world. So Solid book. Coming in at number 3 is Hotel. This is by John Lees, Dalibor Talajic, and Lee Lowridge. I know there are a lot of people who hands down think Hotel is not just, their book of the year from AWA, but I've heard people talk about how this is probably their mini-series of the year, their short of the year. And I like it, but it might not be 100% of my flavor of horror. That I like the idea of 4 kind of one-off stories in terms of the things that are happening at this hotel. I like the idea that there have been people hunting for it, but like the road presents itself to you when you need to end up there. It reminds me a lot of, this kind of B-movie that came out in the 90s called 4 Rooms, which is the same kind of premise of Hotel, but this takes a way more twisted kind of outcome, right? It's 4 rooms meets horror, right? The people who are having bad things happen to them as they arrive are definitely most deserving of what has happened to them. Yeah, buddy. It's good. It's just not the top of my list. That is the lamest cop-out excuse in the world, but what you gonna do? Go swimming? Coming in at number 2 is Devil's Highway. This is a 5-issue arc. It's by Ben Percy, Brent Scoovner, and Nick Filardi. And this, to me, has been a story that is just very intriguing to me, right? That in the first issue, we've learned that our main character is coming back to learn about circumstances surrounding the death of her father, and she unravels some kind of really wicked and wild underground, like, human trafficking organization, and the use of the snakes in here are trippy. The idea that the trucking industry is something that we could see unspeakable things carried on through it, because, right, the trucking industry is one of those things that we embrace as wholly necessary, but we don't really question what goes on, I think is a brilliant premise for, not just a horror book, not just a mystery or crime book, but really anything. And I think the narrative that plays out across books 1 and 2 about this being the perfect setting for this kind of book, right? The dialogue from the perspective of the trucker is that we just kind of ignore that semis are there when we are driving, right? We know they're out, we know that they're ever present, but we know that they're just from stop to stop to stop doing their thing. But from the perspective of the trucker, it's like, right, you ignore me, but I'm acknowledging and watching everything, which allows me to get away with this, that, and whatever. I thought the last issue was particularly interesting in terms of looking at maybe, the head of the snake was not necessarily cut off in this global network, and the idea that it could reach to maybe people beyond trucking, or right, that you have people in their normal everyday lives that can carry out unspeakable things and still hide it from their families, from their jobs, from whatever, is something that I think is really, really good, and I'm very excited to see what happens for the second arc of this whenever it comes out. So there are several other titles that I could pick from. Like I said, I think AWA, everything that came out from them in 2020 was golden, but every time this book came out, pretty sure that I said this was my favorite ongoing book from AWA, or if I ranked other AWA books on weeks that this title didn't come out, I would go, well, X title is still my favorite. And coming in at the top spot in my pick of the year from AWA is Red Border 1 through 4. And this is by Jason Starr, Will Conrad, and Yvonne Nunez. I really like the idea of telling the story from the perspective of an immigrant or of a refugee, where literally nowhere is safe because they are either running from danger or running into danger. That you have a young couple who are forced to cross the border into the United States because they like snitched on a cartel, and now the cartel is out for their blood. They end up, you know, almost getting killed in some sort of massacre in book one, and somebody out of nowhere swoops in, takes out cartel members, and they end up at this house. And what kind of continues to play its way out in books 2, 3, and 4 is this mixture of like Stanley Kubrick's take on Get Out, right? That the home that they end up in seems weirdly hospitable for the kinds of stereotypes we hear about the types of folks who live on the Texas side of the U.S.-Mexican border. Right, there are all of these grumblings about how bad the Mexican food is, but how good it is from the perspective of the family. But this young couple seems to not just be able, they can't flee. And as action is intensely building throughout the end of book 3, you're like, how the hell is book 4 about to shake out with both the family and the cartel now on their heels? And I think that this is a good example of a very, very explosive book that has a quick plot point, you know, a very rapidly approached climax in book 3 that still finds a way to resolve itself in a very nice, neat package at the end of the day. So this was my favorite, hands down. I know there were a couple of people who said, you know, they felt like they could see some of these things coming as it played its way out in the book, and I think that may be true to some extent, but not especially in terms of how everything resolved itself at the end of book 4. But I liked the just creepy feeling that this book had the whole time, that even if you saw something coming that you knew it was going to be bad, I really feel like the creative team behind this book found a new way to make it worse than you could ever fathom or imagine that it would end up for the couple. You had, you know, big, grotesque, over-the-top action scenes, the, you know, human taxidermy experience that you walked through at I think it was the end of book number 2, is something that still just kind of leaves me shocked in terms of just how everything was decided to be put on display in this house. And that's what made it, you know, a good solid book for me, that even if there are tropes that it is played off of from the past, I think it had its own great ways to take a relatively known archetype and storytelling and find ways to turn it on its head. And for that reason, Red Border is my title of the year, my books of the year from AWA Upshot Studios. And everything that they've done, everything that came out in this year blew my mind. They are continuing to push boundaries, and if there's a publisher that I think has set the expectation bar ridiculously high, but we all know that they will be able to deliver to those expectations in 2021, is Axel and the crew at AWA Upshot. So let me know what you think. Are there books that you liked better? Are you on Team Boo Red Border? Are you mad, Comic Burrito, that I didn't put Hotel at the top? I know you are, because you made fun of me on Discord or the Saturday night stream I was on with y'all. Let me know what y'all think down in the comments down below. But we've got more books to talk about, more publishers to rank, so I'll see you again tomorrow. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and have a good one.
Hey, little girl, did you want to know a secret?
I got 5 on it. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4.